Right, let's talk about what's going on in America. When we looked at the figures over there, there isn't a lot of positive sentiment coming out of the United States, but it's also corporate earnings seasons in the States. At the moment, Alcoa results coming out not as bad as we thought. Many people are saying we shouldn't have great expectations in terms of the earnings figures coming out of the state, but it's going to be a good indicator of whether or not the recovery has begun in earnest.
Well, exactly. We've gone from a point a year ago where we were asking where is the next shoe to drop on the millipede to a point where we're now, where is the growth going to come from? And just that subtle shift in mindset says a lot about where we are in the cycle. And these companies have done a lot of job cutting, as you've seen, 21 straight months of job losses in the US employment market.
Right.
Unemployment has doubled. Which means companies are a lot more efficient than they were before. So the thing that I think most people are going to look for now is top-line growth, revenue growth. And I guess it depends where you are and where you're stuck, because it could be easy for us if we were stuck in Manhattan, which might be quite nice from a coffee and shopping point of view, to say to ourselves, wow, we're feeling real beat up about the world. But again, it puts it into perspective. And Jim O'Neill from Goldman Sachs, he's their head of global economics. He basically said at the IMF meeting in Istanbul that people need to wake up to the fact that it's not just the developed world. And that's why I think there's also over time going to be a sentiment shift and a real economic shift to the East. And I think that's where people are maybe going to see inside of these US results traditionally US companies that are moving operations and moving a lot more of their sales just by virtue of the fact that there are more customers to different places around the world. So, but I think in brief, people are looking for top-line growth. And Alcoa's earnings beat, I haven't had a chance to look at it specifically, but you know, they made a modest profit relative to what they were expecting, a modest loss.
Right, and I mean, just before the announcements, from Wednesday, we started getting indications, for instance, coming out of Goldman Sachs that had been studying company profiles to say the bailouts of banks had really taken effect, and some of the results we'll be seeing out of the banks will be a lot better than what we're expecting. So for them, the signs of recovery are there, and that reinforces the views of Larry Summers, who's Barack Obama's top economic advisor, that the recession has effectively bottomed out in the States.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the first guy to call it back in March, didn't Barack Obama say something too? Stocks are cheap back in March. But I think Ben Bernanke said he saw early signs of green shoots. Look, I think there are going to be lots of stumbling points along the way. But for all intents and purposes, like we said at the beginning of this conversation, we have bottomed out and we are starting to see growth. There are many people who still aren't convinced as of yet and perhaps want to see more data points that suggest, you know, perhaps see manufacturing growing in the US, perhaps see the first positive jobs print, which who knows, maybe we'll see by the end of the year. If you're an optimist, maybe early next year inside the first quarter.
Okay, the dollar under a little bit of pressure?
I think it's natural. You know, what people forget is in the pot, and I often say this, in the pot of world investable assets, a third, or just a little bit less than a third, still belongs to the Americans. So if they're selling that to buy Brazil, to buy India, to buy South Africa, to buy emerging markets, they're selling dollars to buy rands, to buy reals, you know, to buy rupees in order to be able to invest there. So it's a sell-off in the dollar, and often people get, you know, use it as the only opportunity to hedge themselves in the short term against the dollars to buy physical assets such as gold. So that's why we're seeing a run up in the gold price, because people are starting to ask themselves the questions about inflation.
Right.
But interestingly, if you'd bought the gold in euros at the beginning of the year, you're actually down. Likewise, if you'd bought it in yen a year ago, you're actually down. And in fact, the rand gold price topped out sometime in March at the bottom of the market. So the next question is, in a world where I only have rands, should I be buying gold at these levels? Should I be buying the gold companies? When from March to now, 7 months later, the effective gold price that they're receiving in rands is actually lower.
Well, you should be buying the gold companies. I mean, the JSE was up 1% or so yesterday at the time of close, and it's the resources sector that's shining. So companies within the broader mining framework, within the resources sector, are doing pretty well.
Yeah, don't confuse good quality companies with the gold companies, Lerato. I think, yeah, I think...
I did ask if you want to talk about Pamodzi Gold, and what did you say?
No, we shouldn't worry about that, simply because you can't invest in it anymore. I think you know, there are two distinct different kinds of resource companies when we look. We look at the useful ones, and you know, perhaps that's being a little bit too simplistic,
yeah.
but what do you use gold for?
Yeah.
You know, it's a hedge against inflation, it's a store of wealth, it's primarily used for jewelry. So if you believe over a longer term that there are going to be more middle class and upper middle class people who can buy jewelry and use it as a store of wealth, then perhaps there's that good underlying demand.
Okay, let's just look at some positive news also coming out of the world and South Africa. And now I'm quoting directly from Bruce Whitfield on 702, who was looking at a survey internationally that has listed the world's top 40 companies, and 4 of those are South African companies: BHP, Billiton, MTN.
I think SAB Miller was in there.
No, it wasn't there.
Wasn't, okay.
Okay, so what do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't actually get a chance to see what it was Business Week used as their metrics for measuring this, but MTN was at the top of the list. I think a lot had to do with the ability to be able to have grown so quickly in a relatively short space of time. I was very interested to see Bidvest on the list. I would have thought maybe one of our banks would have been there, perhaps Standard Bank would have been there. But I didn't get a chance to see the absolute metrics that they use. But nevertheless, again, it's a sign, you know, we often shortchange ourselves. You know, we live in a place where market capitalization in dollar terms is in the top 20 equity markets in the world. And I think Jacko Marie from Standard Bank often makes this point. But just to get back to Bruce, he went to the wrong school in Grahamstown, that guy.
Northam and Mbele?
Yeah, there's going to be an announcement today specifically about that asset called Booysendal. Now, what is Booysendal? Booysendal is an asset that has reserves somewhere in the region of 94 million ounces and a life mine of somewhere around 100 years. So if you're possibly very optimistic about the future of platinum, just in terms of its industrial usage, currently now it's cleaning the fumes that go out the back by way of autocats, so that's about half the usage. More recently, you've seen quite a strong pickup in jewelry usage and jewelry demand. I'm actually looking forward to it. I think it's sometime around mid-morning.
We have to wrap this up, but it's now trading above $1,200 an ounce platinum. Last year, we'd seen the figures almost reaching 2,000. So we've still got a while to go in terms of a complete recovery of that metal. But it's so intertwined, as you say, with the automotive industry. We're not seeing car sales picking up or car exports picking up from countries such as Japan. So what do you think we're likely to see by way of platinum's improvement if we're not seeing dramatic improvements in the automotive sector? Yeah,
maybe take that event and put it aside as a once-off. That was due to power constraints inside of our local markets, and so everyone was scrambling. I think, again, it's everyone stuck in that mindset of what's happening in the US and European auto markets, whereas China, for the first time this year, are going to exceed 10 million vehicles and actually overtake the US. So again, it's about looking at the long-term trends. So as the Western developed world recovers, you're going to see a continued demand from the East.